Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're on a mission to get into a really ambitious intellectual project.
It's definitely ambitious.
Our sources are all centered around this theory called Odam Tili, or OT, which just means human language. It's mainly from Dr. Mahmoudjan Kuchgarov and Marufjan Kuthgarov.
And what's so fascinating here is that, they're not just giving us a new linguistic model. They use it as a lens to rewrite huge parts of history.
And the central claim is pretty wild.
Oh, it's massive. Their high-level claim is that the insights from Odam Tili are so fundamental that we basically have to reclassify all of the human sciences, everything from cognition to history.
Into what?
Into two new eras, before OT and after OT.
That is a staggering claim. So our mission today is to take this OT theory and use it to unpack these, hidden connections between language, power, and what the sources say is a forgotten Turkic legacy that actually fueled the European Renaissance.
Exactly. So let's start with the theory itself, the theoretical rupture.
Right.
Odam Tili basically throws down a direct challenge to fields like Western linguistics, even psychology, the standard Western theory. You can trace it back through Saussure, Chomsky. It says that language starts with abstraction.
With arbitrary signs. The idea that the word tree has no real connection to an actual tree.
Precisely. It's just a random label we all agreed on. Odam rejects that completely.
Okay, so if the sound of a word isn't arbitrary, what does OT say language is?
It's natural coding. The Odam Tili theory says language didn't emerge from some, abstract intellectual leap. It came about as a systematic, natural response to our environment.
So it's rooted in our senses,
Yeah.
our emotions.
Exactly. It's basically cognitive hardware that got coded by the world around us.
That sounds much more, tangible. If language is really this product of our environment, how does that actually work?
Yeah.
Do we have a concrete example of this natural coding?
We do. The theory goes deep on these archetypal figures you find everywhere in nature. Think about the snake, the tree, even the human body. So, for instance, the sounds and structures we use for concepts like, say, slowness or fluidity or even danger might come from the patterns of a snake moving.
You mean the visual pattern?
The visual, the auditory, all of it. That long, continuous S sound in so many languages. OT would say that's not random. It's an acoustic copy of the physical form.
And the tree.
Same idea. The structure of a tree, you have the trunk, then branches, then leaves. They claim this is mirrored in our grammar, like in root words and all the suffixes that branch off from them.
Wow. Okay, if that's true, if language is this embodied response, then the consequences for how we think are just enormous.
They are. The sources say language is the core mechanism of abstract thought.
So you can't have one without the other.
That's the engine of the whole theory. If language is this deeply coded natural system, then thinking itself is always linguistic. You just can't conceptualize things like math or law without that foundational infrastructure that language gives you.
So language doesn't just describe the world.
It dictates how you can even think about it. It becomes the platform for social engineering, so governance and law, and for what they call epistemic inheritance.
Epistemic inheritance.
Yeah, the ability to pass complex knowledge down through generations efficiently and systematically.
Okay, so we've gone from the sound of a snake to the structure of thought to the structure of an entire society. That sets the stage for the history part of this.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
So now we apply this linguistic lens to what they say is the overlooked Turkic legacy in the European Renaissance.
Right. The historical thesis here is that these advanced Turkic knowledge systems, especially their administrative and linguistic structures, were preserved and then passed on through Jewish scholarly networks.
And that these systems played a decisive role.
A decisive but erased role in shaping the Renaissance, global finance, pretty much all of modernity.
And the heart of this whole process, at least before 1492, was Al-Andalus, Islamic Spain. Why there? Why was it such a critical reservoir?
Well, Al-Andalus was this incredible multicultural hub, of course, but the sources really stress its role as a repository for Turkic Islamic science. Its libraries were legendary.
And they held manuscripts from the Turkic Golden Age.
Exactly. Texts with advanced concepts in math, astronomy, medicine, and crucially, very complex structures of governance.
And who were the ones keeping this knowledge safe? The custodians, so to speak.
Jewish scholars. And their role wasn't an accident. The sources argue it was systemic. They were trusted because of their high literacy, their economic standing with rulers, and this is critical, they're pre-existing commercial networks that span the diaspora.
So the OT framework sees this as a kind of perfect storm.
A perfect convergence. You have this highly portable, standardized knowledge, the Turkic administrative systems, and it meets a super reliable, highly connected delivery system.
The Jewish, scholarly, and trade networks.
Exactly. They were the polyglots connecting all this knowledge across huge territories.
Which brings us right to that massive pivot point, 1492, the fall of Andalusia.
And the expulsion of Jewish scholars. It was a massive forced transfer of intellectual capital.
They didn't just leave with their belongings, they left with the libraries in their heads and in their bags.
Absolutely. As they scattered across the Mediterranean, they carried these critical manuscripts with them. And this is where the Ottoman Empire becomes so important.
The Ottomans gave them refuge.
They did. But it wasn't just, an act of charity. It was a strategic move. They recognized the immense value of this diaspora's expertise in finance, science, and trade.
So the Ottomans basically helped reroute all of this high-value knowledge,
Yeah.
often through Mediterranean trade hubs and ultimately toward Europe.
Yes, they helped get it recompiled and back into circulation. And the OT linguistic theory ties directly into the administrative systems that were being moved.
How so?
The theory connects this mobility to what it calls the acoustic language, spread by Turkic nomadic populations. Their empires were vast and mobile, so they needed law and administration that was just as mobile.
Portable law.
Portable, codified law. This is where you get concepts like the Tor or the Yasa. These were sophisticated, standardized legal and administrative codes designed to be applied anywhere and transmitted easily.
So the Yasa isn't just a list of rules, it's more like an administrative language infrastructure.
Precisely. This structured, codified terminology and its record-keeping methods influenced Islamic law, Andalusian government, and then eventually the complex trade practices that started emerging in Europe.
So the sources are arguing the Renaissance wasn't just a rebirth of Greco-Roman ideas.
Not at all. They say it was a powerful synthesis of these advanced Turkic Islamic contributions delivered by Jewish intermediaries.
And do they point to any specific institutions that absorbed all this?
They do. They specifically mention the Jesuit institutions.
Really? Jesuits.
The argument is that they systematically incorporated this administrative and scientific knowledge, which, remember, came from Andalusia via the diaspora and the Ottomans, and used it to build the foundations of modern European universities.
Okay, let's get into some of the really specific claims here, because this is a big one. Let's start with the financial legacy.
This is probably the best documented part of it in the sources. In Al-Andalus, Jewish administrators often ran state treasuries. They had the expertise and complex finance.
And after 1492?
After 1492, they carried this high-level financial knowledge. We're talking about credit instruments, risk models, early forms of double-entry bookkeeping directly into the new European trade hubs.
So the OT theory would say that the rise of, say, Mediterranean banking is a direct inheritance.
A direct linguistic and administrative inheritance from those Turkic governance structures just transmitted by these knowledge keepers.
So modern finance isn't a European invention, but a highly optimized import. And it didn't stop at banking. The sources go after Christopher Columbus, too.
They do. They strongly suggest Columbus's voyages weren't based on some brand new European map-making. They claim the maps he used, like the Matos Carta, were actually based on much older, more sophisticated Turkic Islamic cartographic traditions.
Is there a specific hypothesis for how he got them?
The hypothesis is that Columbus was relying on documents and specialized knowledge that was carried by Jewish converts who were deeply involved in navigation and trade logistics.
Wow.
They even cite some controversial evidence of pre-Columbian Muslim influence, like certain architectural finds in Cuba, to back up the idea that his journey was informed by this pre-existing maritime expertise.
Okay, now we have to talk about the most challenging claim in this entire thesis.
Epistemic erasure.
The idea that this was all deliberately hidden.
This is where we have to be careful, but the sources are very clear. They argue that the European establishment, so the Vatican, the aristocracy, the new scholarly class, they engaged in a deliberate process to obscure the Turkic and Jewish origins of this knowledge.
Not an accident, a systematic project.
Yes, removing authorship, reattributing major discoveries to European figures, and promoting a purely Eurocentric narrative. It was all about consolidating their own cultural and intellectual supremacy.
Hold on. Systematic erasure can sound like, a grand conspiracy. Does the OT framework offer a specific mechanism for how this would have even worked?
It does, and the mechanism goes right back to the core theory. It's linguistic. The motivation was to control the origin story of the knowledge that powered their rise.
And how does language play into that?
If you can detach the knowledge from its original linguistic context, from its original administrative language, then you can erase its origin. Once the language is gone, the source becomes forgotten, and it's easy to claim it as your own.
And the sources also say this wasn't just imposed from the top down.
That's the tragic part of it. For their own survival in Europe, Jewish communities sometimes had to conceal their deep Turkic intellectual or even family origins.
A kind of self-preservation.
Exactly. The sources mention an elite knowledge-bearing class called the Ili Tabaka. They practiced a kind of linguistic self-preservation, a strategic silence about their heritage to survive and continue their work.
So after all of this, what does this actually mean for us today? The power of this OT framework seems to be that it doesn't just show you hidden facts. It forces you to completely rethink how progress happens.
It does. It centers things like language, mobility, and intercultural collaboration as the real drivers, not this, linear single origin story we're used to.
You start to see history as a series of complex intellectual transactions.
And if you apply the OT framework, you're shown a narrative where Turkic linguistic systems, Jewish diaspora networks, and Ottoman strategy were absolutely central to building the modern world. It stops being a European miracle and becomes a Eurasian synthesis.
And this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought that's rooted right in the core of Odam Tili.
Mm-hmm.
If this theory is right, if language really is the foundational code for our collective memory and our systems of administration, then just think about how vulnerable our civilization is, how susceptible we are to the deliberate politicization or even the destruction of linguistic context.
Because the theory suggests that if we let our language get manipulated, or if we just forget where it came from, that leads directly to the loss of epistemic origin.
Yeah.
It lets the powerful rewrite history itself in real time.
That makes you ask, what administrative language are we all using right now that we don't truly understand the origins of?